Welcome everybody to the first official Tower Monthly seminar of the spring semester. Feel free to get coffee, cookies, don't stop eating, sit back, relax. Our speaker today is Professor Jesus Velasco of Tarleton State University. He is Associate Professor in Joe and Teresa Long Endowed Chair in Social Sciences. His topic today is up here, the other immigrants' Mexican brain drain to the United States. It's a fascinating topic. I'm really pleased to have him here. Professor Velasco has written extensively on these issues for a long, long time. His full bio is in front of you. Everybody should have a copy. And at the bottom of your handout, there's a couple of upcoming events that we wanted to alert you to in the next week, dealing with terrorism, intelligence, big data, and Australia in no particular order. Please, if you're not on our mailing list, please talk to us after the program. We'll get you involved. Also, we have all of our events up online. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Professor Velasco, and he'll speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Sir? Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, to Professor Holyfield, to Luisa that arranged everything, and I'm very happy to be here. I have seen many familiar faces, from Cal to Professor Foley and many other people that I know. But let me start just saying that when we talk about immigration in Mexico, we have kind of preconceived images. And the preconceived images that we have are something like this, right? So, or something like this. People, hard-working people that cross the border, undocumented, most of the time, sometimes documented, to work in the American fields. But very rarely we have something like this, right? This is Mario Molina, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, or Jorge Castañeda, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and scholar at NYU, or my dear friend Mauricio Tenorio, former colleague of Foley, that is professor at the University of Chicago, or Dr. Q, that many of you are familiar with him, right? We can talk later about this. So the purpose of this presentation is basically to explain why Mexican high-skilled workers come to the United States, yeah, and assess the implications that this kind of immigration has for both Mexico and the United States. And finally, in doing that kind of job, try to see what are the theories of high-skilled worker immigration and how they can explain or not explain the phenomenon of Mexico. So, in order to do that, I would like to divide the presentation in four main parts. The first is just to talk a little bit about the different theories of high-skilled working and immigration and how they explain the case of Mexico. I'm going to be brief on that. The second is just to give you some numbers, just to give you the numbers of the people that are coming to the United States that are high-skilled workers. Then the explanation of why they are moving to the United States. Is there any particular reason that these people are moving? Is there any particular reason that they are moving in a higher amount during the last 2 decades than before? Third, and explain implications for Mexico and for the United States of this kind of movement. And then some concluding remarks. Okay, let me start talking a little bit about neoclassic theory, that is the typical theory of brain drain. The brain drain notion starts in the 1960s, fundamentally because many of the British people were moving to the United States. Why? Because of better salaries. Americans pay better than the British people, so they were moving here. So people migrate because there is a difference in salary. So they want to have better income, so they move to this place. So, and this brain drain has a negative effect on the sending country. So in this case, particularly Mexico is highly affected by these highly trained people that leave the country and come to the United States. However, this theory does not explain many of the features of migration, like insecurity, working conditions, and different issues that are related to reasons behind immigration. There's the new economics of migration, in which weight difference are not the only reason. The decision to migrate is related to maximize earnings of the family. So here what we have is that the family increase incomes when the people members of the family come and start working in the United States. In this particular case, the specialists do not focus mainly on the individual or this or that person. They focus mainly on the household. And the household it's very important. Why? Because the central issue here is that these people send remittances send money to their homeland, right? However, in many cases of brain drain, for instance in Africa, we see that these high trained people send money. In the case of Mexico, they don't. I conduct 25 interviews with people, highly skilled workers in Mexico, and neither one of them send money to Mexico. Why? These are middle-class people. This is not the kind of people that come and work in the fields that they basically support their families sending money. This is a different kind of people. It's kind of what we define as a middle-class people, with all the difficulties to define that kind of person.
The money comes from Mexico to us.
Yeah. So, then there is the network theory. The network theory basically says that if you migrate, it's because you have a network. And that network helps you to explain why we have in New York Los Poblanos, the House of Puebla, in which many Poblanos or people from Puebla live right there and move to Puebla, or the people from Guanajuato. Why? Because you have this network, and this is accumulation, an accumulation of networks that help you to really settle down, which is easier when you know somebody. I remember every time that I moved to the United States, and I moved to the United States during my life like 7 different times. This is the only one that I didn't know anybody. Jesus Christ, it's a hassle. It's really a hassle. You don't know the streets, you don't know the people, And then I discovered that TVs require cables. I have to call the guy, and it's a problem, right? So networks really help. So, in this particular case, many of the people that receive training in the United States or move for better jobs, they don't have any network. So this is a problem for this field. So these theories, in general terms, do not explain insecurity, do not explain fear of crime, do not explain professional development, do not explain conditions of work. So in my view, and this is a work in the making, we need a multi-casual method that can deal with different aspects of this migration. So we need something that considers, for instance, brain exchange, and we will deal with this in a little while. Brain gain or brain circulation. And topics that traditionally are not covered by the theories of immigration. So what we need to do is to have conceptions that not see global mobility of talents in an unidirectional way. So we come from Mexico, get in the United States. Well, what happens with the United States with the Mexicans? So we need like a two ways happening. And what I have been doing, and I published 2 articles for the educated people on this topic, is to first conduct interviews with Mexican scholars and professionals that are here, and those articles were based on that. And second, I'm trying to organize a survey with a colleague in Mexico that we're going to be sending online to professionals in the United States, especially using the Mexican Talent Network, and I will talk in a minute. So we hope that by earlier than the beginning of the summer, we will have the results of this survey, so we will be able to really give you more hard evidence of what we have. The questionnaire is already, but we have to start sending it. Okay, what is my general thesis for this talk? Well, the structural reasons that provoke Mexican high-skill migration are not going to change. This is not going to change. There is no way that can change, at least in the near future. If you invest, could change. But in the near future, it's not going to change. So a bunch of Mexicans are going to come over to try to find jobs in the United States. Okay, some numbers. Let's start really with the topic. Well, college-educated Mexicans living in the United States, in the year 2000, we have around 300,000. By the year 2010, we have more than 1 million people. Right? This is highly important, especially if you consider that in Mexico, the average educational level is 7.2. Right? So it's middle school, basically. This goes further if you see that in Mexico, roughly speaking, and sometimes it's very difficult to find the real number for obvious reasons, what we have is about 30,000 Mexicans, PhDs. 11 of those live in the United States. So almost 50% of the Mexican PhDs live in the United States. Of course, it's like 37%. If there's a mathematician, please help me. Some numbers here, right? So the National Council of Science and Technology, CONACYT, estimates in 2012 that about 4,500 Mexicans were studying MA or PhD abroad. Of those, 27, almost 28, are in the United States. The United States is the main recipient of students of Mexican students. However, apparently this year, England is going to be first. This year, so the British have invested a lot of time and a lot of money providing scholarships and publicity and stuff like that. So this number is going to change pretty soon. Who are these guys? Well, and sounds like funny, but I'm going to try to prove that I'm right. Rodolfo Dirso, Mario Molina, Alfredo Quiñones, and you can find a lot of different people. A lot of different people that are just humble professors. For instance, in my university, there are 5 Mexicans that are teaching over there, that they are not associated to the talent network, that they are just professors in this university. Or myself, I'm not Rodolfo Dirso. Who is Rodolfo Dirso? Well, Rodolfo Dirso, it's an interesting case. Let me just give you this one case because you know many other cases. This guy went to give a lecture at Harvard, and in Harvard they took a note of his reference phone number and stuff like that. And then he was invited 3 times to give a lecture in Stanford in about a year. 3 times in a year? That was kind of weird. So the last time, he got together with the dean of science and said, Professor Dirso, we would like to have you here to work for us. What do you think? And Dirso said, oh no, I mean, I've been working in the National University of Mexico for more than 25 years, and my lab is there. And the dean said, what kind of lab do you have? The dean said, well, this kind of lab. What about if I build you one lab? Build me one lab just for me? Yeah, why not? So Stanford built a lab for Rodolfo Dirso. Why did they bring this guy? Because of this. This is a guy that is awarded Presidential Medal of Ecology in Mexico, chair of the biological section of the Mexican National Academy, member of the U.S. National Academy of Science. There are only 8 people, Mexican people, that are member of this organization, among them Jorge Duran and Rodolfo Dirso. Member of the American Academy of Arts and Science, and member of the California Academy of Arts and Science. So it's very good guy. I mean, he is not Professor Velasco, believe me. Or this guy, you know this guy, he has been in TV and all the time. He crossed the border as an undocumented worker, handled to go to a community college, ended up in Harvard Medical School, and then he is the main brain surgeon in Johns Hopkins University Hospital, the best hospital. So how did he did it? I don't know, but he did it. Hard work. Why do they move? Well, first of all, because the Americans want them. Because the Americans love them. So there is a pulling factor. You know, I grab these guys and bring them here. Just look, if you finish a PhD or MA in engineer or math, the American government give you a green card. Just like that. You know, I have a green card now. It took me a lot of time to get it. It's not a piece of cake. But I studied political science, so who cares about this? Right? Look what Bill Gates says. We need to attract and retain the brightest and the most talented people around the world. And he promotes these and promotes temporary visas for people that come, get trained for 6 months, and then he send them back to India or to China, and instead of paying $7.25, they pay $1.50. Universities, look what Yale says, but you can find many universities in the United States. The Ivy League university, you can find something similar like this, that they want to attract the best people around the world. So there's a pulling factor. Second reason among the 5 that I'm going to try to describe, lack of proper research infrastructure. You know, in Mexico, for a long time, we were moving between 0.39 and 0.40. The authorities of Mexico are claiming today, we have 51% of the GDP in research and development, which is an historic fact. However, just look, Israel 4.20, Finland 3.80, South Korea 3. The United States 2.68, and you might say, wow, but these are very developed countries. Well, just compare with the Latin Americans. Argentina 0.61, and the Brazilians 1.25. Brazilians, we thought that they were just playing soccer. No, they do something. Lack of infrastructure. I can tell you many anecdotes, but a friend of mine was a physicist, and he was working in the best university in the world, UT Austin. He was working in a lab with a bigger machine than this room. And I said, what are you going to be doing in Mexico? You are going back, right? And he said, yeah. Are you going to be working in your same research? And he said, no, I'm going to be teaching theory. I said, why? Because we don't have that machine. So this lady, Clara Godoreski, is one of the most distinguished microbiologists in Mexico. She published in any main journal in the United States. I mean, it's a very distinguished person. Look what she said to me. Her salary, we will talk salaries later, her salary, it's about $1,500 per month. $1,500 per month. Okay? This lady, which is a very good friend of mine, is the head of the Department of Virology in the University of Nuevo León, in Monterrey. Laura Trejo sustains to me that at least 50% of her students that come to train either in Europe, the United States, or Canada leave Mexico planning not to come back. And according to her, one of the main reasons of this is because those students have seen the difficulties of the Mexican researchers to do their work in Mexico. So they want to be scientists. Instability of research institutions. We can give a talk about just with this slide, right? Politics in academia. Mexican academia is full of politics, right? Especially because many of the universities that do the research are financed by the government. Union strikes all the time. Student strikes. Just think of what happened in the Polytechnic Institute just last year. They were strike for about 4 or 5 months, and so they didn't have a class. They lost the entire semester. Government pressures to change research. That is not unique of Mexico. That also happens here. Are we going to be working on stem cells or not? Just to give you one example. Political appointees. I can give you a bunch of examples of people that have very poor background and very poor academic work, and they were holding very important positions. Government bureaucracy and university bureaucracy. Look, Jorge Soberón de Ragnar is professor at University of Kansas, was the head of the Department of Biology in the National University of Mexico. In Mexico, to get the prize for DNA, it's got to be in the United States. We don't have them in Mexico. So to get those is really a hassle, to put it bluntly. You have to first contact the people in the National University of Mexico to go to customs. Then to beg, cry, do everything you want to the people of customs to liberate the primes. It can take months to do that. So that's another reason. Salary gap. Well, it's true at certain level. Just let me give you some examples. In Mexico, if you are a political scientist and you just finished your PhD, you are getting about $30,000 per year. That's the average. In UT Austin, it's $85,000 per year. Medical science professors in Mexico, $22,000. In the United States, $79,000, almost $80,000. So the difference in salary is huge. However, if you are good and you reach the level of a senior professor, the difference is still high, but not that big gap. Why? Because in Mexico we have many compensations. For instance, we have aguinaldo, that is a monthly payment that you receive at the end of the year. In some institutions, you receive even 3 months of payment. In the United States, when I came here and I ended up the year, I didn't have my aguinaldo. Jesus, that was horrible. We have SNI, that is the institution that helps to finance the research, is part of CONACYT, and give you some money just to do your work. If you're a very serious scholar, they give you around $2,500, $2,700, something like that, depending on the exchange rate. If you are a rookie guy that is just starting, they give you about $1,000. So, but also there is another problem, that is the problem of living in Mexico. Many people don't want to be in the traffic. You know, when I came over, I decided to live in Fort Worth. My university is in Stephenville, and my colleague said, "Are you gonna be driving for an hour to come from Fort Worth to here? Why don't you live here?" I said, "Look, this is about 50 miles drive, right? In Mexico, I drove for 1 hour and 15 minutes, 20 minutes each way for 14 miles. So that for me is a piece of cake, this." Why are they moving? The last reason, security reasons. Just you can see the numbers of kidnapping, for instance, extortion, intentional homicide. A lady at the National University conducted a very small survey, very small, not significant in the numbers, so we cannot draw any serious conclusion from this, but at least give you a sense. According to her survey, 76% of the people that are Mexicans living around the world that are high talented are leaving Mexico for security reasons. My colleague, the one that we're going to be conducting the survey, she did a very accurate job in Australia, which is not a very significant, because the number of people, of Mexican people living in Australia, it's very small. But again, it's an indication, it's an indicator. So she sustains that it's one of the main reasons that people are moving from Mexico to Australia. So, in security reasons, it's also can be expressed when you see the people that go just for temporary time to Mexico. For instance, for a long, long time, especially in Cuernavaca, Mexico, Americans were moving to learn Spanish. They have a very good institute run by the National University. Everybody was going there. Right now, Mexico is not the main destination. When I arrived to Charlton, I said, I have experience. I have organized seminars with Johns Hopkins University, with UT Austin, with many other institutions. So if you want, I can organize a trip. My colleagues say, don't even try to do it, because the president will say no. Okay. The Institute for International Education sustains that Costa Rica and Argentina are the number 1 and number 2 of new destinations for a short period of time students in Latin America. And look, the numbers in Costa Rica, in 2009-2010 cycle, 6,000. They are almost 8,000 and a half. In Mexico, look, the numbers from 7,000 to 3,000, almost 50% down. So the Mexicans are not going on a regular basis. Sorry, the Americans are not going to Mexico on a regular basis for a short period of time. So what are the implications of this? First of all, for the United States is great. It's a free ride economy. So why? Because you don't invest anything. Most of the people in Mexico study in public schools, from primary school to high school. Then many of them go to either private universities or the National University or the Polytechnic Institute. So the Americans are not investing in anything. And then they get the best. they study basically with Mexican money. The main source of funding for the Mexicans when they come to study here in SMU. Well, in SMU is a little bit different because it's a private school. It's a Mexican government. It's gonna see. Sometimes you have a binational agreement like Fulbright, in which the Mexican government plays some money and the American government plays another kind of money, and so together they provide scholarships. And very few times, but we have to count them, it's with American money. For instance, one of my oldest students went to Harvard and he didn't pay a coin. Why? Harvard fully financed him. Yeah, but Harvard admit 10 people per year. He was one of them. So I'm not saying that is not the case. There are cases like that, but this is not the most often and frequent case. You is receiving a highly qualified Mexicans, and there are many filters, more filters than the filters that we have with the Americans. Why? In the United States, the good student get into good universities, good records, and then they finish and that's it. In Mexico, you have to go to the process that sometimes it's a hassle. I can tell you my own story. When I decided to come, I applied to CONACYT. And the guy of CONACYT rejected my application. I said, why did you reject my application? He said, because you don't speak English. I said, what? But I have in front of me my record that my TOEFL is like 600 at the time. So I can't speak English. And who cares? The university already accept me. We're not going to give you anything. So sometimes, it's a bad thing, but sometimes plays as a good filter. Why? Because you can apply, you can be accepted by an American university, but if CONACYT doesn't give you the scholarship, you are not going to be able to come. So it's another filter that the Americans do not have. What are the implications for the U.S.? Well, the Mexicans contribute to the global science and are shaping American science and culture. And I can give you a couple examples. Look, Ignacio Chapela make a research. He's a Mexican that did a research in Oaxaca, trying to flow the transgene from genetic modified corn into the Mexican wild maize, right? And he started doing this kind of research in Oaxaca, Mexico. Then he was hired by Berkeley University. Berkeley University has a contract with one of the main pharmaceutical companies. When he published this, Berkeley denied, for political reasons, tenure, and then the full faculty member provided tenure, and finally he got tenure. Rodolfo Dirzo is working today on how, when we kill the big animals like the elephants or the giraffes and stuff like that, how would that affect human beings? Okay, is there going to be more rottens, more mice, more rats that will affect our behavior? He didn't start doing this research in the United States. He started doing that research in Chiapas, Mexico. But now, because he has the resources of Stanford University, he's doing the same kind of research comparing Mexico with Kenya. So he goes to Africa. Mexico, implications for Mexico. Mexico is losing some of the best guys, right? These people do not pay taxes in Mexico. They pay taxes here. These people do not send money. There's a lot of confusion on this, because when you see the case of the Africans, for instance, they sent a lot of money. The high-skilled workers send a lot of money. The Mexicans don't send money. The Mexicans, they invite your mom to come to Boston to spend Christmas Eve and buy the ticket, and that's it. The Mexicans are not participating or contributing to the reputation of the Mexican Academy. Dirzo is not training Mexicans, he's not mentoring Mexicans, just one or two that ended up in Stanford too. He's mentoring American people, right? And so this is apparently an entire loss for Mexico. Does Mexico has any kind of retention policy? You know, what Mexico is doing? Yes, they do. they have this national research system in which, as I said, they give you extra money for doing your research. If you are a good researcher, they're going to give you like $2,500 per month just for doing your research. So it's a way that they try to hold you. CONACYT has a reputation program. So if somebody wants to hire me, let's say in Mexico, and I want to go to work for El Colegio de Mexico, a very distinguished institution, or for CIDA, that was my former institution, they're going to give some money, like $10,000 to the institution, and another $10,000 to me, right? So it's a good business. I know a couple of people that did that. A couple of years later, they went back, so they got the $10,000. This is not enough. So what we are talking, and the specialists are talking more often, is not only a Mexican brain drain, or brain drain in any kind of forms, but mainly of what Louis Pasteur called science knows no country. So science is a public good. If we discover how to control Ebola in Papua New Guinea, it's going to be applied in Africa and in the United States and in Texas. So what people are talking now is that these guys that are in the United States can help Mexico with circulation of professionals, with transfers of knowledge, that this is not a lost, entire lost kind of population. Is the Mexican government doing something else? Yes. The Mexican government created this Mexican Talent Network. That is an organization promoted by the Mexican government, is not organized by the Mexican government, but is promoted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and especially in the different consulates that we have here. The Dallas Talent Network was created just about 7 months ago, something like that. And the idea is to put together the talent people and have communication with companies, with academias, with the government in Mexico. The Mexican government and many of the people that have been working in Mexico in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they believe that to stop the brain drain is a lost cause. There's no way that we're going to stop. So how don't we try to get some benefits from the people that are already here? So, and this requires important synergies between the professionals, perhaps organized in the talent network, and the home country institutions. So, what we can do, what we are proposing, or myself, at least to think, to implement this is complicated. Well, first to identify scholars, it's very complex because the Mexican government doesn't know, CONACYT doesn't know, and nobody knows. As I said in my university, I am associated to the Dallas Talent Network. 4 of my colleagues that were in my university are not. Why? Because they didn't know. So it's difficult to detect. Then support by CONACYT to Mexican scholars working abroad. We're in the worst possible world. Why? Because if you want to apply to a scholarship or financial aid to do my research in CONACYT, I'm not allowed to do it. Because to do that, you have to be working in a Mexican institution. But if I want to apply to Fulbright, let's say an American institution, and I want to get some financial aid for whatever, I can't. Why? Because I'm not an American citizen. So what is the possibility? None. I'm not going to get any grant. So we should solve this. Joint projects between Mexican and American universities, we have been doing that. And on a regular basis, there are different institutions in Mexico and the United States that sign agreements. For instance, the Mexican government has an agreement with universities of California. If a scholar is working in Mexico and can create a joint program with any university of the California system, and they will provide some financial aid. We have been doing that, but perhaps we require more. Then we have not implemented transnational teaching models. The only one that and by this I mean something very nice that could be done easily in any American university. You can put in the same room, in a room like this, a course like Foreign Views of the United States.
Thousand pardons.
And you bring a group of people in India, a group of people in Mexico, a group of people in the United States. You coordinate this. The professor in India coordinates part. The professor here coordinates part. And they teach using this system, Skype, Google's group, all those systems. And it's very nice. By my initiative, Johns Hopkins started doing this with Andrew Seeley for a couple of years ago. And they are doing with the Colegio de Mexico and CIDE. In a very small scale, U.S.-Mexican relations. But it can be done, and it's very nice. And then transnational dual appointments. In the United States, when you are a senior professor, it's not rare that you have a dual appointment. So you work in Stanford and you work also in Michigan, but you work during the spring in Stanford because Michigan is frozen. So why don't you do it with Mexico, right? We have not promoted that. So let me just finish so I can try to answer your questions. Well, as a concluding remarks, the United States has an immigration policy for high-skilled workers. Mexico don't. Right? So we need to do something more. Given the disparities in many things, like equipment, money, conditions in Mexico and stuff like that, this is not going to disappear. Higher education and research and development in many ways are already in the making between the United States and Mexico, so we have to work harder than this. A possible solution, but this sounds easy, but it's very complex, is to have really a binational brain circulation program in which both governments at the highest level trying to implement this, and in which you allow people, but many universities are not going to gain in the United States anything, or they don't perceive that any gain. So it's not easy to do it, but could be done. So I will say that, and with this I finish, that in Mexico, the situations, the causes that push people of high-skilled talents to move to the United States are not going to change, and are not going to change in the near future. So I'm afraid that you're going to find a bunch of Mexicans working close to you in the near future. Thank you.
We'll open it up to Q&A. I'll take the prerogative. But why would U.S. universities go along with any of this? Why would the U.S. government go along with any of this? This is, as you said, the U.S. in this rare case is a free rider. In every other case, we're not. Mm-hmm. But in this case, the U.S. seems to be getting all of the benefit of this pool of enormously talented people for free. Right? How would you convince an American university administrator to go along with this? How would you convince an American government official to go along with these programs? What would be the gain from the U.S. perspective, or what would sweeten the deal to make Americans more?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer first, and then I give you an example.
Okay.
Because the American universities can be highly enriched with the presence of foreigners in their universities in this current globalized world. This is my answer. Example. My son studied high school here. He learned English when he was 5 years old, so he doesn't have even an accent. This tropical accent, he doesn't have it. So we went to Georgetown University, in the Georgetown Southwestern University, to visit. Before even the visit to start, the guy that makes the tour approached me and said, "Mr. Velasco, we want your son here." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Look, it's a fantastic opportunity for us. He is fully bilingual. He is fully bicultural. He studied in Mexico. He studied in the United States. Do you have any idea how can he enrich our students?" This is at the college level. So, and this happens all over. I mean, at different levels. What is the most important nationality in the Silicon Valley? Indians. It's the highest number of people in the Silicon Valley are Indians. Well, they are making connections between them and India. They are enriching the culture of those places. I mean, there are many different features. And right now, if you organize this kind of Google programs and transnational programs in universities like this, it's very chic. It's very nice. I mean, so in this globalized world, the interaction and the most open vision that you can provide to your students will be highly rewarded by many universities. Yes, sir. Then I give the word. Yes. Oh, well, I don't know.
Well, I'll take the cue just to keep things over. So I had Matt first, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Yes, Matt.
Well, so two things. One just follows up on Josh's question, and then another point. So I understand everything that you said in your response. That makes a lot of sense about the desirability of bringing this international students, international talent to American universities. But based on what you said, it sounds like that's already happening. That is, that U.S. universities are already benefiting from all this Mexican brain drain, right? So these Mexican highly trained scholars are already coming to the United States. So can the U.S. basically just stand pat and continue taking advantage of this? Or are there policy changes that the U.S. government needs to make to even more take advantage of this? Or that is, are you saying from the standpoint of the U.S. government, the status quo is pretty ideal? I guess that may be some of what Josh was driving at, because it sounds like from the U.S. standpoint, the current situation is pretty great. They're already benefiting from the advantages that you're talking about.
Not only the Mexicans. I mean, if you learn that the highest number of students in the United States are Chinese, and most of them don't want to go back, despite the fact that the Chinese government is providing everything to them. Everything means everything.
Right.
So yeah, but let me tell you, let me start for the minor points. Most of these people are in the United States with, in the case of the Mexicans and also in other cases, with visas B1, A1B1, which is a regular visa that is provided for 3 years and can be renewed after 3 years for a maximum of 6. Right? There are not many visas of that provided by the United States. So one of the claims that Bill Gates, for instance, is asking is to have more visas for these people. Okay. So the government got to do that, even if the universities, got to do that. So that's the small one. Second, the Mexicans are competing with the Americans. So many people do not like that. There are many people, not many, but there are people that do not like that competition. And it's not only the competition of the Mexican, it's the competition of the internationals. Why do I have to have a Mexican here if there is a very competitive person that is an American? There are studies that try to show that the Mexicans receive less salary than the American professors in an average term. That's not my case, so I cannot talk. But there are studies that try to prove that. There are studies that try to prove that there is a brain loss, and the brain loss is regarded to the idea that you bring a guy that is a professor in chemistry and ended up working, driving a taxi because he never got a job. So you are losing those. Those kind of studies never apply to the Mexican case, but there are those kinds of studies. So first, the government can do a bunch of different things. Second, the Mexican government pushes to do this. Why? Because it's good for Mexico. So the Americans cannot ignore the idea that for instance, the American embassy in Washington, embassy in Mexico announced like 7 months ago, like if I don't remember wrongly, like 200 students will come for 6 months to study in community colleges here. So it's part of the permanent deal that the Mexican government pushes, and there are many guys that are in the business sector, that they are, because we're academics, so we think in academia, right? Well, there's a bunch of guys that are living in the new Mexican Polanco that is right in close to Houston. I forget, Woodlands. Right? If you go to Woodlands, it's a Mexican town. Right? Why? And who live there? very rich people. It's not poor people. It's not academics. There are many families that are moving their people, that they are professionals, let's say computer specialists, that they work for any company, that they are very rich, right? And they commute with Mexico and Houston. So they come twice, 3 times a month, and the families live there. These people are partially inserted, and sometimes they come and start working for American companies. So it's not like, of course, the Americans are winning, and they are winning, especially when you talk about academia. But there are many things that you can do, and also the Mexican government is going to be pushing to do more things because they are the ones that are losing. Even if they do a bunch of different things, I don't think that they're going to be very successful because the reasons are structural, are not conjunctural. So it's going to be difficult, very difficult to solve criminality in Mexico.
Very, very quickly, just ask you one other thing. That is, you focused on science PhDs predominantly here. Does this same phenomenon exist in, for example, among lawyers, MBAs, bankers, writers, I mean, other highly trained people? And then you can just give a quick answer and let other people ask questions.
Well, in the private sector, it's very interesting because the people of Mexico get better salaries than the Americans. And many of the headquarters of American companies are in Mexico, so they do not have to move. So it's a temporary movement for training in the United States. Mm-hmm. But a friend of mine that is the CEO and head of Publicis, that is the main publicity company in the world, is a French one. He said, you know, my American friends ask me to connect them with Mexican jobs because I make much money than them. So it's not that clear, but they come for. So most of the people that come and stay in companies come for 2 or 3 years, get trained, and then go back. There is a brain circulation in the business sector in Mexico more than in the academia. They are lawyers. They are political scientists. You know, Guillermo Trejo just published a couple articles in American Political Science Review. He was my colleague at CIDE, where he is, Notre Dame. So it's all over, and with different, and we do not know, and that's what we're trying to place with the survey. We do not know how many and in what professions. We have a little clue, but no more than that.
Before I ask my question, I'll give you another couple of quick examples. Borderland studies are very important in a lot of universities in the Southwest, and those typically involve a lot of scholars from Mexico as well as U.S. scholars. The Latin American Studies Association has long given scholarships to students and professors from Latin America to attend the convention. It often is held in Latin America as well, and they try very hard to involve Latin Americans on their executive committees and so forth. So that is very different. And also their flagship journal is free open access to everybody. So that's another area. My quick question was, you commented on salary differentials but didn't talk about relative cost of living in the two countries. And then another one, there's an anthropologist named Larissa Adler-Lomez who published a book some years ago that focused on the training of scientists in Mexico. And what she pointed out is that research institutes in Mexico are far more important in this respect than universities. And I just wondered how that possibly complicates you.
Well, just a quick answer to the first one. I mean, living in Mexico is not cheap. And Mexico, you have to remember that is highly concentrated. So the federalism doesn't work like in the United States. If you really want to be, in the action, you have to be in Mexico City, perhaps in Monterrey and Guadalajara, and that's it. If not, you are lost, basically. So I go to Mexico on a regular basis, and it's more expensive than living in Texas. So, at least for me. Perhaps housing is a little bit more expensive here, but we are reaching the point. Second, yes, research institutions has been very good for a long time. I work, and I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I work for one of the best, if not the best, that was the Center for Teaching and Research in Economics in Mexico, CIDE, for many years, for more than 20 years. And yes, we, for instance, in C, they have like a 3 BAs. We receive like 200 applications every year. We accept 20 students fully funded. The relationship between professor and student is 6-1. And they are fully funded. So they are very good. Mr. Arriaga comes from El Colegio de Mexico, which is as good as at CIDE for a long time, and it's very good. The government has invested in these institutions, and there are many others that are like that. But that doesn't jeopardize anything of my research, because many of these people are also moving. I mean, I can pinpoint from my generation like 5 or 6 people that were at CIDE and right now are there in the United States or in England. So the movement, and it's related to many other things, like, for instance, equipment, access, dialogue. You know, I work on this, but I also work on American politics. So I wrote a paper that Carl read on the life and work of my dissertation advisor, Walter T. Vernon. To do it here was a piece of cake. I just got the phone and I called Stephen Skoronek, and Skoronek knows me and said, yeah, let's talk. Carl received me for a couple hours in his office. Couple hours, Jesus. You know, in Mexico, there's 30 minutes and they kick you out. I mean, so it's a different environment. I'm in a permanent dialogue with the people. You know, for me, this is great because you are confronting me all the time. And my Mexican colleagues are not going to like this, but there are higher standards in American academia than in Mexican academia. So when you challenge me, I try to get better and better and better to reach that level, which sometimes I don't have to reach it in other places.
Roki next.
My one comment and my one question. My comment is, it's, you know, your talk was interesting because I have stayed in the U.S. after getting PhD. So so I basically agree that, you know, the brain circulation is very important, and for the obstacle for the brain circulation, one thing that you didn't mention, or at least you didn't focus on, although you mentioned briefly, is, I think, a lack of security in Mexico. So then, it's difficult for people in the U.S. to visit Mexico, and then it makes it more difficult the academic interaction between U.S. and Mexican Institute.
Well, I mentioned security as one of the issues that bring people to the United States. But besides the fact that, I think it's a serious issue, we have to really be careful with that, because many of the security issues in Mexico are not as dramatic as sometimes people see. For instance, if you go to the Yucatan Peninsula, it's safer than Canada. So in Canada, it's one of the safest countries in the world. So we have to put in perspective. I'm not saying that we do not have a problem. I'm just saying that we have to put it in perspective. And then in Mexico City, which is the main area of action, the criminality is not as big as in other parts. So we have to also be aware of that. And if I don't remember the figures, but I have them. If you see the killing of people, we talk about the 50,000 people that reached during the Calderon administration that were killed. The great majority of those killings were not between drug traffickers and civilians, or drug traffickers or the army and civilians, were between the army and the drug traffickers. So I'm not saying that doesn't exist, please, don't get me wrong, but we have to put in perspective that I know that there are many people that are very happy to go to Mexico, and if they are especially scored by one of the Mexican people that really know how to handle the city, I have never heard any problem. I did many projects with Johns Hopkins University to bring students to Mexico, and we never face any problem.
My one question, a quick question. Do you have any comments about or research about skilled labor, but not that highly skilled labor, which is like skilled labor in factory, middle manager in the company, and then
No.
Yeah.
No, this is basically concentrating high skilled workers, and by high skilled workers, I didn't say that. That's my fault. We consider people that have BA or higher.
Christian.
Comment. Enjoyed your talk. Just quickly, background. I'm a partner in a firm that does venture development. We build companies and we advise universities and governments on innovation policy. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. We are currently building a company with Mexican recent PhD students, members of the Red de Talentos, the Mexican Talent Network, and we've also worked with the consulate on some ideas of what we can do around this very issue. We see a tremendous opportunity that you haven't addressed here around brain drain, and that is commercialization of technology and the creation of new ventures around these kinds of people. The beauty of that is that these are ventures where the Mexican government can be supportive, very cost effectively, because we're not talking about a lot of money for these early stage companies. These are all companies that can scale very quickly and employ many people. And the problem that we see is that multinationals, large companies, tend to think globally. Universities often have these exchanges. The small companies, the startup space tends to be very single country oriented. So the opportunity we see is in creating these transnational companies, a company with one foot in the United States, another foot in Mexico, and you might have these principal investigators, the chief technology people in the US, but these people can employ lots of other Mexican nationals. So it doesn't completely address the brain drain. They may not want to go back to Mexico, but they might. They can employ lots of other people in technical companies in the home country.
Well, I think that here the room is open for creativity. I mean, there are thousands of possibilities that you can do, either with the government or without the government. And there are.
And this is true without the government
Yeah,
as well, right?
yeah.
This is something that can be put.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So there are thousands of possibilities, and they are the people here. You have people there. You have initiatives. I mean, people can benefit on this, and I think that what you are doing is just great. I mean, and there could be many other possibilities. I mean, here the room is open for everything. I mean, basically.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your presentation. I mean, we've had the chance to discuss some of these issues on a one-to-one basis, and it's always very insightful to hear the progress you're making with your research. I work in the Mexican consulate here, so we've had a chance to talk about these issues, not only in terms of our past experience, but also in terms of what the Mexican government is actually undertaking currently with regards to some of these issues. So I think, I mean, that would be one of my comments. I think that the most important aspect would be that higher education is an issue in U.S.-Mexico relations at the political level, at least for the current administration. I mean, it has been a very important aspect to include in the formal political bilateral relations between Mexico and the United States, how to address some of these issues of mobility, of student mobility, of student circulation, of student exchange. I mean, we've talked about Proyecta, this initiative to bring 100,000 Mexican students to the higher education, Mexican students to the U.S. in the next 6 years, and we've already achieved 20,000 in the first year of this program. So, I mean, clearly there is a governmental commitment to address the issues of higher education at the political level from a government level. So I think that would be one of my comments. And the other, I mean, is more a question of the definition, and we've already started addressing the concept of highly skilled Mexican labor. I mean, how do you define it? Clearly, I mean, most of your examples dealt with academia, and I mean, we started talking about other aspects of the labor market where you could identify very interesting cases as well that could, help you prove your point, and in some ways, in some aspects, perhaps lead to different conclusions. And here I'm thinking more in terms of not only the example Christian was mentioning, but Mexican corporations which have gone global have clearly, used Mexican skilled labor as part of their, management board in the United States. And this has been something that is very fascinating for the consulate, is to identify highly qualified Mexicans in Mexican corporations that have their headquarters here. I don't know what's going to happen to them in terms of, the long term, if they're going to stay in the United States or at some point they will go back. But nevertheless, that's a dimension that I think would add, different insight to your study. And that's where we think that the program we started, the Red de Talentos, the network of talents, is very important in terms of identifying where you can find highly qualified Mexicans who are not only in academia, but they're also in private corporations and Mexican multinational. I mean, I've been talking to some of those examples, and it's really very interesting to hear their perspective, as to why they are here and why eventually, they might think in terms of mobility at the global level, where the Mexican corporation might have headquarters in other countries of the world. Well, they will perhaps, also head over there. So I think, that's a dimension it would be interesting to see in your research.
I think those are very wise comments, and I fully accept them, but let me just respond quickly. When you mentioned, for instance, that 100,000 people are going to come to the United States, my second question is, so what? They're going to come over to the United States, they're going to get trained? Are they going to stay here, or are they going to go back to Mexico? Right? If they are going back to Mexico, perhaps they're going to be absorbed by the Mexican academia or factories or companies or government or whatever, and that's fantastic. My hunch is that many of them are going to be enchanted with the United States and are going to try to remain here. So we're going to be losing. Unless the Mexican government goes deeper than just bringing the people. And to go deeper, you have to create programs of brain circulation. And to create those programs of brain circulation requires different kinds of agreements, and agreements that go beyond bringing people. Because we have to aterrizar the problem. We have to go down to the problem and to create those conditions that make possible the brain circulation. Because for me, and we have many disagreements. Victor was my boss in the academia because he was an academic before. So we have been doing this for 20 years. So right now he's in the government and I am the academia. But we have been doing this for many years. So we are not going to solve anything like that if we do that. The second part of your question, I think, is fascinating, Victor, because I would like to know, and perhaps you have the answer, don't get me wrong, if the companies that are here, let's say in Texas, are hiring Mexicans that move from Mexico and stay in Texas, or they are bringing Mexicans in the headquarters that they know, that they trust, to develop the factory or the company here. Because what is happening in the private sector, and I mentioned this during my presentation, is that there is a brain circulation in the private sector. Why? Because they come and work here for 2-3 years and then they go back. And many of the American companies and the American headquarters are in Mexico. So there's not even need in some cases to move from Mexico to the United States. So I do not know, and I think it's a nice dimension that you are highlighting, and I think we have to take into consideration that. But I do not have a straight answer because I don't know. I think we hope that the survey will let us know more about that.
A question way back, sir. All the way back against the wall, yep.
Yes, I'm Edwin Blunt. I met you, I think.
Yeah.
I run a private research practice for the past 35 years here in Dallas. Much of it has been dedicated to multicultural consumers across the U.S. But I've done a number of projects in Mexico as well, in Puerto Rico. And I like to think that we have kind of got the ball rolling on the collaboration in the research area. Recently, I assisted another organization here in the U.S. to conduct a survey of returning migrants in in Guadalajara. Using our survey technology, they were able to complete surveys on tablets and other technology. The field workers, I actually went to Guadalajara to train them. I'm glad I learned Spanish a little better than when I grew up here in Dallas. And we also had an opportunity to collaborate with La Universidad Autónoma Estatal de México in Mexico City to do a presentation on the U.S. Hispanic and multicultural trends in the U.S. They want to know as much about us as well. While I was there, I developed a relationship with Parametro, a political science professor, has a consulting company there. He does a lot of political polling there, not by phone mostly, but we decided to collaborate. I conducted a couple of workshops on research methodologies in terms of how we do it in the U.S. We compared notes about how they do it and the limitations that they face in Mexico. And we resolved that we will work together when there's a private or public effort in the future in Mexico where he needs some assistance and vice versa if they have research that they want to do. Because I have done several projects with private companies that are interested in Mexico, that are interested in the Hispanic consumer here in the U.S. So the seeds of those collaborations can work, but there's got to be something, like you were saying, some knowledge transfer involved in there. And it's got to be, it's not going to happen unless there's some incentives. Okay, I tend to work for a profit. There's incentives already built in there, but I also enjoy sharing the information about survey methodology practices that can facilitate, responses in different types of contexts. And so I just wanted to mention that, and also the fact that the identification, the identification part, I've worked on some projects also that help to identify Latinos in the U.S., and perhaps the use of some technology to facilitate that. Because no one's really wanting to make, we can do it, but no one has made the investment to actually use our current technology like app development and things like that to identify them and get them to join a central talent pool that can be shared with many others. But the technology, the basics, it does exist. If someone wants it then, those things can be done.
I will.
I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much.
You'll come, sir, please. Go up the line.
I've known an awful lot of scientists in my career, and I seem to discover with them they have no loyalty to anything except their science.
Mm-hmm.
They will go where they can work and find the resources that they want. It's as if academia, and particularly the scientific aspect of it, is sort of a nation without a country or without territory. And a friend of mine, as an example, her daughter is a geologist, studied in Germany, she's German, studied in England, taught in Sweden, is now in Australia, and we have no idea where she's going next. Her children speak 3 languages, and they don't have a state. And that's the reality that I think all of us in the world face, that if we don't provide the resources and the attractions for the brightest people in the world, they're going wherever they can find what they want, whether they're in America or Mexico or wherever.
Yes, I fully agree with you, and there is something even more. In the United States, we have a great concentration of scientists, more than in any other country in the world. And by scientists, I not mean only hard scientists, but also social scientists. If I don't remember wrongly, about 75% of the political scientists that work in political science live in the United States. I mean, 75% of political scientists in the world. So there is a lot of attraction to come over. I mean, second, any specialist on immigration will tell you that there are many reasons that people migrate to one area or another. And one of them is proximity and relationship. And so we have proximity with the United States. Some of the main universities in the world, the top 10 universities in the world, Some of them, not all of them, are here. The great majority. You have Cambridge and Oxford in England, and you have others, but I mean the great majority are here. So there is a tendency, if you pinpoint the number of Nobel Prizes people that get the Nobel Prize every year, of course there are many foreigners, but the great majority are Americans. So to come to the United States to do science, it's a permanent attraction. It's a permanent attraction not only for the proximity, not only because the educated Mexican, every single generation are becoming bilingual. And what's going to happen is, I don't know, in 1 or 2 generations, the Mexicans are going to be like the Indians, with the tropical accent, but they speak. I know people of my generation, I know at least 10 or 15 people that their sons speak English impeccable. Why? Because they were born when they were students in the United States. So this generates a lot of facility, but you are absolutely right. And when I talked with Laura Trejo in Nuevo León, in Monterrey, she told me, they go not because they want to betray the country. No, they want to do science. And if they find a way to do science in another place, they are single-mind people doing science. And I fully agree. So that's the reason that I fully agree with you.
Sir, please.
One of the interesting things is that in the United States, while the university system is great, and we need these professionals from other countries to fill the gap because our lower level education system is sinking worse and worse, and we're not providing enough people that are skilled enough and qualified enough to fill these higher level jobs. But to me, it seems that it's in the U.S.'s long-term interest that Mexico succeeds. And while we can look at short-term things, if Mexico doesn't get onto a higher growth system and develop its own educational system, especially at the lower levels, we're going to have bigger and bigger problems going forward in the long term. At least that's my view. I think Mexico's success economically and with jobs and security is in the U.S.'s long-term best interests, and we need to put some of these other things behind us, and we need to do a lot more of the things like Christian was mentioning, etc., to get businesses and growth and prosperity into Mexico. Otherwise, our long-term future will be at risk.
Yeah, let me just mention a couple of things that are related to that. One is demographics. We know that the United States, the growth of the population in the United States is declining. So you're going to need immigrants if you want to keep this economy moving in the same speed. Second, we know that in American universities, the best students are the foreigners, are not the Americans. And it's not because I'm a foreigner, it's because he has been tested. What happened is, if you rank the 10 best people, the number 3 to 10 are foreigners, but never the number 1 and 2. The number 1 and 2 are Americans. Why? For many reasons. One of them, they know the system. Second, they know the language. When you don't know the language, you have to circumvent using other tools. And you pick here and you pick there. So you master the language. There are many other reasons that make this. So when you foreigners, I'm not talking about Mexicans, when foreigners compete with Americans, the great majority of the biggest talents are foreigners. Never to the level of the number 1 and number 2. And this has been tested in many cases. Third, so the competition is furious. It's a horrible competition for any kind of jobs. And the competition in the United States, it's unbelievable. A friend of mine applied to a job in the United States. They received 210 applications for one job. 210 applications for one job. Are you going to tell me what is the difference between the number 200 and the number 207? I mean, it's almost impossible to find it. Networking. Right? So sometimes networking start working. So you call Professor Gilson, do you know this guy? Maybe. So if he recommends, he has a lot of prestige, or you know math, or whatever, right? So these elements are always in favor of the American people, not always in favor of the foreigners. But the foreigners have to work harder than the Americans because they have to master many things that the Americans learned since they were in primary school.
But they're willing to work harder.
And they are willing. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because in some cases, like in China or in Taiwan, it's a betrayal if you fail. I mean, one of my former colleagues in UT Austin did not pass the comms. Jesus Christ, he was worse than I know, committing the most horrible crime. Because in his country, this was seen like an offense to the family, to the people, to the government, to everybody. So they worked very hard.
Hiroki can tell you about how it is in Japan, right?
Well,
one mistake.
And only one exam to get into the university.
Yeah.
We have time for one last question. Been waiting the longest. Did you have your hand up?
I was just to get my
I see.
colleague in.
Well, can I make one?
Sure.
I interview applicants to Princeton from the Dallas area every year. Some of the brightest students I would describe as foreigners, but not in the way you do. Their parents came from China. They grew up here, basically, although some of them may have moved when their parents came over and they were age 5. I interview people from the students at the Texas Academy of Math and Sciences. They are brilliant kids. They are fully bilingual. In fact, many of them speak 3 or 4 languages very well. They're top GPAs, SATs, all that. In the 37 students I interviewed last year, there were 3 I would describe as Caucasian, through and through. All of the others had foreign backgrounds of one kind or another, either South Asia, East Asia, Latin America, whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's a part of the group of people that you can study, but is not part of this, because that would be classified like a kind of a second generation. Although they were born in Mexico or in Japan or in the Philippines or whatever, they basically grew up here. So that's one of the advantage of these people, because they learn, and that's the disadvantage of the recent coming people, because they learn the entire system. So you are absolutely correct.
They are better than the American-born students, who are Native American in that sense, because they have multiple languages and exposure to other cultural backgrounds, which make them more attractive to the elite universities.
And that helped me to recall the first question. So it's very attractive for universities when you have a guy that speaks 3 languages, that has been living in Europe, in Asia, and in Latin America, and is willing to come to SMU. Jesus, that's a jam that you want to exploit. I mean, but thank you so much.
Well, with that, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but just please join me in thanking Professor Velasco.
I think you need to add it.